The Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection is at the center of a new bit of controversy as it's been discovered that Aspyr lied about the use of fan assets and are now essentially trying to cover it up. I've talked to the modder at the center of all this, and I'll share all the details with you in today's video. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. We are unfortunately again talking about the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. I say unfortunately because I intended to never cover this game on the channel again. As I stated on Twitter, I've refunded the game, and if you're having a poor experience, I encourage you to do the same. However, when I saw this story, I knew I had to talk about it. It was right in my wheelhouse and involved, in fact, a controversy that we covered before the game even launched. In short, Aspyr has used fan assets despite saying they wouldn't, and it's all fairly messy, and my conversation with the mod creator actually was quite enlightening into the degree to which this experience should and could have been avoided and how pretty much everyone now is worse off. If you want the full backstory, I encourage you to check out the video I did before the game launched on this situation, which I've linked down below. But in short, what you need to know is that Star Wars Battlefront on the Xbox originally had exclusive content, including 2 heroes, which the PC community tried to port into their game. Now, at some point, Pandemic actually made some of the Xbox files available so the content could be fully ported to PC, but before that, the content was essentially emulated through a combination of custom modder work and selectively reused assets like animations. Anyway, when the trailer for the Classic Collection was dropped, it was discovered that Aspyr was restoring the content to PC and PlayStation through the mod rather than a direct port of the assets. This was bad for a few reasons. For one, I mean, credit the people who did the work, and for two, they were using an older version of the mod which provided an emulated rather than true experience. Aspyr responded to the situation after it went mainstream through publications like IGN and videos like myself and others made by saying, hey, that was just a mistake. It was part of a build that was just temporary. When the game launches, everything you see will be true to the game and no fan content will be involved. Well, lo and behold, the game's launched, and at launch, fan content was still there. I was actually lucky enough to speak to the creator of the mod which was used, I Am Shaman. I've linked to their social media and some of their projects down below. Most relevantly, of course, there's the Star Wars Battlefront 3 Legacy mod they created, and of course, the Xbox DLC content for PC mod, the source of today's controversy. So unsurprisingly, the situation here was fairly complex, so it was quite helpful to have I Am Shaman sort of walking me through what happened. As I explained, there was a controversy when the trailer dropped. However, when the full versions went live, and I quote, upon release, both the PS5 and Switch preload releases included files from my mod. The PS5 specifically had the full Asajj Ventress from the trailer that started all this, while the Switch used my files but replaced the animations. That latter bit is especially weird, like you're gonna take the time to port the content over but only part way. Anyway, the Switch version was actually decompiled, and it was discovered that yes, files from the mod actually did make their way within the final game. Aside from Asajj Ventress, the other character affected was Kit Fisto. You can go to Shaman's Twitter page for a full breakdown of how it was confirmed that the in-game assets are the same as the modded assets. It's kind of the same process that we take on the channel whenever we're looking at copied work, like in Star Wars comics, for example. Do they make the same mistakes? But anyway, the community has also discovered that it was really an external support studio, Dragon's Lake, which did a lot of the work on the Classic Collection. So it's both Aspyr and perhaps Dragon Lake who were responsible for the use of modded fan works. And before we continue, I do just want to point out that no one is claiming this is illegal. It probably is. Usually, depending on the user agreement, when you modify a game, you give up your rights to that sort of content, and even if you don't, it's sort of sticky where you're working with an existing IP and duplicating work from another experience, but no one is claiming that this is illegal or that the modders are owed money. What people are saying is that this is a heavily deceptive practice, that it's lazy, and that it's indicative overall of the type of care or lack thereof put into this game. Shaman says, and I quote, "My issue is now the blatant lying and deception with the response to using my mod," and they're referring to the response after the mod was discovered in the trailer and sort of the state of the game was lied about. Since launch, the game has been patched, and now the files, although not removed from the game, if you want to decompile it, you can probably find them yourselves, have been replaced by official files files from the Xbox version. And I mean, hey, that's great, but we also really just know that it was fan backlash, and more realistically, the coverage of big publications like IGN, which forced Aspyr's hand here. And it's interesting because if you look on the Battlefront subreddit, you can see there were people confused why Asajj and Kit Fisto weren't quite right. I asked Shaman for a full statement, and they didn't really have one. I feel like they're mostly disappointed, but what they did pass on to me is that the modding community overall is pretty much in denial of the Classic Collection, and that the hardcore fans are pretty much going to stay, on PC at least, with the existing releases, which is a shame because it would have been nice to have a good basis to build off of for the future. One thing they say that's really interesting is, had Aspyr contracted a couple of us modders, things would have gone so much smoother. You could not replace 20 years of experience with a game and a game engine with a random support studio, and I think that's so true. There are all of these community actors, people who have been working and loving the game for 20 years, who would have been so happy to simply help make the game better and to even just get mentioned somewhere in the game's credits. If you're a fan of a game like Star Wars Battlefront 2, if you're still playing it after all these years, becoming a part of that game's legacy would be such a cool feeling. And that's one thing that I've seen consistently with Star Wars fans when they have their work appropriated, especially without credit. It's sort of a mixed feeling because it's like, in one way, I've contributed to the universe and I don't want to take that away, but in the other hand, I've contributed through somebody stealing my art or my work and passing it off as their own. I think as a show of good faith, it would be nice for Aspyr to add I Am Shaman to the credits of the game. I think that's probably at this point the least they could do. But ultimately, it's disappointing that they went with the lazy way out. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't need to be like this. My friend Corey put a really interesting tweet up. He said, game developers often directly support modding. We've worked closely with Petroglyph and Stardock on Empire War and Sins, and while there are legal limitations on what can be owned, done, or communicated, both sides of that relationship understand the importance of honest communications. These people have been playing the game for 20 years. They know what can be fixed quickly and what should be fixed. They know sort of the bigger issues, and honestly, even when it comes to importing the assets, they've already figured out the way to do it properly. Anyway, that's all I really have for this. I did just want to end off this video though with another bit of disappointing Star Wars Battlefront news. This one comes from the new Battlefront, and specifically EA. My friend Jay, who you may know as Charlemagne, worked for a long time as the Battlefront community manager before moving on to BioWare. He was the guy who took over after the Pride and Accomplishments drama, and he did such a great job getting the community to support the game, getting them behind the game, turning around the overall sense of negativity, which honestly he had nothing to do with. He came into the situation, and through his positivity, his hard work, and his open communication, really did a lot for Star Wars Battlefront 2. And as someone who worked with Jay personally, I've met him in person several times. He was just the nicest guy you could ever meet. So I was very sad to hear today that he'd been let go from EA, and just want to put this out there as someone who's been a part of a community managed by Jay and who has worked with Jay on a personal level. He has my support, and whatever game studio gets him, either in his CM role or in some other role, has a real asset at their hand. I would encourage you guys, if you follow Jay on Twitter, to throw some support his way. I also know that he absolutely loved working with Star Wars first, BioWare second. He was very passionate about the Mass Effect franchise and Dragon Age. So if you like him, throw him some love today. But that's all I've got. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.